And we are back. Stripe Show podcast coming at you. Another week, second week in February. I think we're getting closer to golf season. You know, every time I say that, I always get a DM or two. Someone texts me and says, yeah, it's 80 degrees in Ponte Vedra, but look at this picture. My sister sent me a picture from Montana, and the snow was over the snowblower. So I guess it is kind of winter still out there in much of the United States. And I know that it's winter in Virginia today because my guest is joining me from Virginia. And there's a big snowstorm coming. And he's one of the top teachers, Golf Digest best teachers in the state of Virginia. Jon Eisman, thank you for joining me because I know you got a storm coming.
Thank you, Travis. It's a pleasure to be on, man. I've listened to your podcast and all the coaches. You have some Hall of Fame coaches on here, so I'm privileged and honored to be on today. I appreciate it. A little storm coming in, but hopefully not too big.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know, I'm a fan of your work too, and I know you've got two facilities up there, Laurel Hill and Twin Lakes.
Twin Lakes,
in Virginia there, and I started following you on Instagram. At EismanGolfAcademy.com. And I would encourage you to go follow him. Check out his website, EismanGolfAcademy.com. But go look at his content because it's not only great content, but, you know, I've had a lot of discussion with teachers and I watch their stuff and I love it as you do, I'm sure. And, you know, there's so many great teachers that have so much great information, right? But they can't always articulate it, you know, and it comes across, I think, pretty complicated. Mm-hmm. I know sometimes for me, I'm like, I have a hard time following along, and I know the content is great.
Yeah.
And so when I look at your stuff, you do not only have great information, but you articulate it very, very well, and it comes across and it lands well. And I think that's fantastic. So I look forward to this discussion today because I know my audience, you know, who is made up of teachers, who's made up of amateur golfers, and I'm sure there's a few professional players out there that are listening to this. This information today. I think it's fascinating stuff. I think it's really interesting stuff as it pertains to force plates and ground reaction forces. And we've done a little bit of conversation with this on the podcast over the last year or two. But I want to go deeper into it this year. And I think you're the perfect guy to get into it deeper because you've been using GASP and force plates for what, 10 years now?
Yeah. It's been a long time. GAS most recently, probably the past 4 years.
Okay.
You know, honestly, Travis, I started with like those pressure plates, just the basic pressure plates that you can stand on from Body Tracks and those things, you know, probably a decade ago. I always felt like there was value there, but I didn't know what the heck any of that meant in a golf swing. Was it important? Is it a teachable thing for us? Is it something that's valuable for us as teachers, as instructors to really help students that way? I know I played a long time. I'm sure you did too. And you took lessons and we didn't really hear about certain things within our feet and within the ground, right? This is still kind of new. Mm-hmm. I think we're taught how to hold it, how to swing the thing around our spine and how to, you know, stay on plane and hit the golf ball, right? And mm-hmm. If we start to curve the golf ball a little bit, then we kind of change that setup around a little bit. So I think the force plates really have opened my eyes a little bit more to the human, to the student that's in front of me at that time. Mm-hmm. And I have a great story of this that I think really kind of resonated with me. I was at Congressional Country Club a long time ago. Year Rory run the Open, and I was doing a clinic, and I was waiting to present to kind of work with a bunch of juniors. And I was watching this golfer in front of me. She was probably 12, 13 years old, and she was hitting driver, and I was just sitting there in a chair waiting for my time to come. And she was pounding these golf balls, just every ball, just laced, just it sounded good. It was straight. And she was falling all over the place. All over the place. You could take Scotty Scheffler and multiply that times 10. I mean, she was almost falling. She was almost falling over. Mm-hmm. And I was watching that, Travis, and I was like, "What? Well, you know, how can she line that face up? How can she find the face so consistently?" Mm-hmm. And the funny part is there was an instructor walking down the range with a clipboard, grading everybody's finish position. And I'm kind of watching this kind of merge until like, okay, here comes the instructor grading everybody on their finish, you know, like toe tapping, being in balance. And she got to this girl and said, okay, show me that golf swing. And the girl did the same thing she's been doing. Her feet were all over the place, almost falling over. And then the instructor said, well, let's work on that balance and let's work on that finish, couple drills, let's do this. And I sat there and I watched this girl, and she missed every golf ball. She had a perfect finish, Travis, right? But she missed every, and nothing against the instructor, but she missed every ball. She topped balls, she whiffed balls, and she sat down kind of crisscross applesauce and kind of put her hands in her face. And I was like, is that a teachable moment? Did we just take the best maybe female golfer to ever play and do something that she can't do because it looks functional? You know, like, and so I always remembered that in the back of my mind. Like, I still remember that today when I'm doing lessons. Like, I can still see her swinging and going, don't teach that out of somebody. So the ground reaction forces and these force plates have enabled me. If Travis comes in and he swings and we look at it, that's what Travis can do. Do we need to even go down roads of changing those things, or can we just gently nudge in some areas? And I think the nudging is where we need to stay and live. I think I think it just gets difficult if it gets too crazy with that.
Yeah, I think that's well said, nudging. Because I look back, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I look back at the early days of, down at the World Golf Village, TPC Sawgrass Academy, and working with a lot of junior golfers and developing them. And you certainly, I think and I still do to this day, like, you have a picture in your head. You have things that you like to see, that you've seen work time and time again over a course of time. And I think every teacher has those.
Yeah.
But I think in the early days, I probably would go to it pretty quickly, and I would probably be pretty aggressive. And I think as I've gotten older, I let things certainly play out more. I nudge more.
Yeah.
But a lot of this, I think stems from the technology that we're talking about, in particular, when it comes to force plates. Because let me tee up with this before we get into some of these concepts here. You can have someone, to your point, as you mentioned earlier, up and down the plane, nice, P1, P2, P3, P, it's like this. Wow, look at the shape of that. That is beautiful. And this player from face on, wow, good turn, got a weight shift. He's rotating, head's a little behind the ball. He's turning through, not a lot of stop. It's like, wow, that looks pretty good too.
Yeah.
But you can take a couple of those swings, 2, 3, looking at those swings, and the force plate underneath, and the data from the force plate can tell a pretty different story, right? Just because it looks good, like, it can tell a very different story in how they're using the ground.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that we look at golf swings and we say, these golf swings look great. They look, to our eyes, they look fantastic. And I think, I think overall, it's when we do put them on technology that we're trying to find what's wrong with it, right? So I think the main thing is, if it looks good or if it looks bad, is it functional? Are they putting the face to it? And as instructors, we go to these certain looks, and we want to change those things right away, but we got to know why that human is moving that way. And that's what ground reaction force, that's what these force plates are for. They are for us understanding why that player is moving the way they do in that 1 second of the golf swing. That is really what they show us.
Right.
So, I mean, even force plates for me, I turn them on, but I don't even look at the data yet. I take the videos and I look at the videos, and I'll use my golf instruction brain and say, hey, okay, what are the things that I see? And then I'll look at the force data, and that will tell me the reason why they're doing that. Instead of vice versa, where sometimes we just put people on the plates and we go, okay, your vertical's off or your lateral's late, but we haven't even really looked at their golf swing yet.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to use them the right way. And that slow nudging of how we want to be introducing ground reactions to forces to people is different for everybody as we do that. And so I just think there's good ways to use the technology, and there's ways that really hurt us at the same time. And I've been asked a lot to kind of go up and present and say, tell us everything you know about ground reaction forces. Well, I don't know if I could really do that effectively unless I have that person in front of me at that time and describing that. And so we take the science and we start putting people into categories and in all these things. And I just don't think that's the way that we should be doing it.
Okay.
I think there isn't a quality 100% matchup all the time, and so we need to stay in that world.
You sent some notes to me, and I want to start getting into some of the meat and potatoes of this, and one of them stood out to me about the fundamentals. So I want to start with that,
Sure.
and how you view what are the real fundamentals, and fundamentals. Are you talking as it pertains to just kind of overall the golf swing, or in particularly just ground reaction? Where are your fundamentals?
Yeah, I think the fundamentals have been handed down to us in a book or through instruction and guidance, that grip, stance, ball position, posture, right?
Yeah.
That's where we start. That's where we would
Yeah.
start with somebody that's new to golf. That's where we would start with a lot of people. And sometimes even instruction, we go back to those. But none of those things have anything to do with movement. So our job as golfers is to move. Our job is, hopefully that movement influences the golf club. We can swing the golf club with no ground reaction forces. You've seen Chris Como off the diving board kind of swinging a golf club, but we're going to use them no matter how hard you try. You're still going to use those ground because your feet are on the ground. So to me, fundamentals is, if Travis is in my studio, what is his fundamental way to move? And I think finding that for each individual golfer is where you could kind of make some magic. And that fundamental movement that you either like to do because it's cozy, or your body's making you do that, is your fundamental. I mean, it's not overall, those four basic things that have been fed to us year after year. We have to look at the fundamental as well as movement within the human chain and how we're about to swing the golf club.
And so there's different movement patterns available, right? And how one can move, and what you're saying is some can move a certain way better than others.
Yeah, I think when you look at human movement and you're about to swing that golf club, you're in a setup position. And is your setup position ready for you to move? If we have to define what is the setup position of golf, what would we say? The setup position is for us to, grip the club, stand to the club, look at ball position for us, look at our club face. But really, the whole point of setup is to be about to move, and how we are about to move within that motion. And is your body prepared and ready to move? The better players that I've seen that we've recorded are putting their body in a position that is ready to move. You can think about a starting block in track and field, right? Where everybody gets in that starting block and they're about to push and launch themselves down the track. Well, that would be a really good player that uses their body efficiently in that setup to move. Or am I running the 100-yard dash and I don't get a starting block to push off of? So I'm just going to try to go as fast as I can off the gate. Well, everybody's going to blow by me right away. Maybe my top speed is at the end of the race. So this sport, we're able to control those things. We're able to kind of put ourselves in a position to move more efficiently, because we are kind of standing still. So that to me is a fundamental movement, how that person in front of me is presenting themselves to hit that golf ball. And if they're presenting themselves in a way that is prepared to move, then they're going to be more efficient with movement.
And one of the movements is lateral, right? Side to side, which I know you're big on. So I want to get into a video here. I'm going to play this video. It's about a little over a minute.
Yeah.
And for those listening, you're going to hear him describing. And for those watching on YouTube, you'll see it. And I'm just going to set the stage here before I play it. As you're talking about the first student is, a little bit more stagnant in the way that he's turning. And then as you get to the second video, I should say, he's kind of using some momentum where he's kind of moving into the left, then pushing back to the right to load up. So I want to play this video, listen to this video. For those listening, kind of follow along here. I think this is an excellent video on the lateral movement and what it means to how the body's kind of how the spine's moving.
really cool peek today. Jason talking about some right to left force in his golf swing and keeping it constant. We've been preaching kind of a little bit of this towel drill for people, and this is one way that we see it and how it's efficient. So if you're looking at his old motion here and you see these force graphs and it looks like a roller coaster through there out of that's his right foot, you can really tell that push laterally isn't constant out of that right foot. So it doesn't really overtake at the correct time, or when it does overtake, it's so great that it's throwing his center of mass, really on the wrong side of the golf ball here. So a lot of times when I see guys that have this look, you can't really fix that with a ton of discussion of where the spine needs to be. You got to look underneath the feet. So now that we see the new one, you can see the difference. There's the old one. See all the roller coaster within the peaks of right to left force. Here's the new one. And we've been promoting a lot of this towel drill type feel, and you could see how that evens out his right to left force. Yes, it does increase it, but it evens it out in a way that stabilizes his mass and puts him in a better position at the top. So, this look of having this extension, mid-thoracic extension, and leaning over to left has a lot to do with what kind of line of action you're creating with those laterals on the ground, and that's something to look at.
All right, so hold that thought, because I want to play the drill, right?
Yeah.
That you were talking about, the towel drill, which I think is brilliant, and I use it a fair amount here as well. So
yeah.
Here's the towel drill, which I think is a great video for those watching here and listening to check this out, because this is really good stuff.
All right, so for all you students out there, coaches out there using the towel drill, I'd like some feedback on this as well. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this and you're gonna fold it up, kind of like a bow tie. You can feel this a lot more. You can kind of see the free moment happening. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, now try it. Yeah, there you go. You can see that. Boom. Activation. Good. Notice how the towel's moving. It's rotating. One's sweating.
I'm sweating.
So what are we looking at there, and how that affected the previous spine in the video we watched before that?
Yeah, so that right to left force, that when we first saw that student was in a setup position with their feet just flat on the ground, in what we would call a setup or a comfortable position. The difference is when you create that stretch with the towel, so we're kind of creating that tension along the ground and we're pushing our feet down and away, it's going to stabilize a little bit more of the mass. If I push equal on both ends of my feet, right foot, left foot, my mass is not going to go anywhere. Now in golf, we have to move. We have to get off the ball. So when we're ripping that towel and the lead foot always wins in getting off the ball, there's a little push off the ball that we need. Well, if you don't have that trail foot in the ground, creating that lateral kind of braking force, meaning the force is going to go in there, Travis, but that trail foot is going to brace against it. That's what stabilizes the mass. So when people have total extension of the spine, or running over, or their mass is tipping a lot, usually we look at that lateral force, that right to left force, and we stabilize that for them. There's a lot of good things that happen. And noticing, I've looked at a lot of players, and I just started noticing those that create this tremendous amount of like turn and stretch and dynamic movement have those feet just ripping that towel apart in the backswing. And I think for years, I've played a lot of golf, and I can tell you, I just got comfortable at setup, right? Let's just get ourselves comfortable. And I never felt any of that movement. I never felt I was prepared on that right to left, that lateral stretch. I never felt any of that before in my golf swing. And that is what's setting the chain for the rest of the movement. So if we don't set that movement piece up correctly or efficiently, everything's late. Everything's chasing. Again, I'm back to the track meet where I don't get off the starting blocks as efficient, right? So now I'm trying to make stuff happen. So there you'll see, and and we know that ground reaction forces obviously influence the body. We can see that in the video. What you really don't get to see a lot is how it influences the golf club. Is there any scientific proof 100% that these ground reaction forces influence the golf club yet? I haven't seen the proof of everything yet.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what, you see this in your own lessons, that man, that's in a different position than it was before, right? So we're influencing that student earlier by presetting some of that feel. We're not ripping it the whole time, but I can tell you that most of the times I've worked with tour players to 20 handicaps, a lot of times nobody's ever felt that type of reaction in the ground.
Yeah. I agree. And I can remember when I went to that the first time and pushing, like, I felt, to your point, that stability.
Yeah.
And when we were looking through video, this one kind of stuck out to me because obviously we see this particular pattern a decent amount, all of this extension in the spine, kind of leaning pretty hard to the left in the backswing. I have a guy that I just started with that, really a strong guy, good athlete, 44 years of age, has a lot of back pain. And he came to me and he looked like that, but it was a little more severe yet. A lot of extension in the spine, club pitched down pretty steep in transition. And then he's a decent player. Like we see with a lot of decent players that do that, he early extends, stands the handle up, and then his spine falls back pretty violently the other way.
Yeah.
And so we have agreed that, look, we need to take some of the extension out of your spine early in the backswing. And we've used this and the towel drill, which helps. And with that, along with some of the discussion of flexion and extension in the spine and understanding how to kind of rewire that, has put him in a better position to now, go left and hit it. And this is not uncommon even at the highest level. I just saw Daniel Berger, who played very well last week. He's taken a lot of extension out of spine in the backswing. Ricky Fowler had a lot, and that was leading to him falling back. Right. Will Zalatoris. So this extension in the spine and what it means to health in the back is huge. And I would imagine this towel drill has been huge for that.
Yeah,
helping that.
Yeah, it really has. And to piggyback back on like injury and we get students that come in, and obviously like my lumbar spine hurts, my back is always hurting. How can we get that pressure off of that? When someone tells me that, the first thing I always go to is, wow, they're probably not loading the body efficiently enough because all of that is going somewhere else, right? So I always think of it like a rubber band. If I have a rubber band and I'm just pulling back a rubber band, I can pull it back really short and let go, and it's still going to go forward. It's always going to go forward because it's loaded, the material of it. If I pull it back really fast and really far and let go, it's going to go forward. How do we make our golf bodies similar to that? Right. So maybe if I'm older and I just pull it back a little bit, but I'm still getting the momentum that's needed and the loads that I'm needed to go forward. Yeah. Or if I'm if I'm swinging at 130 miles an hour and I'm able to pull that thing back and let go. Right. So yeah, there will be some injuries based off the spine when it gets into those flexion points in the spine and extension. We know that can kind of lead to some pain. But I can tell you this, even with the towel drill, I wasn't the first one to measure this, or I wasn't the first one to ever stand on a towel. But I do feel like we were the first one to kind of see, well, what is it really doing? Yeah. And so we started measuring that with students, and we started to see, I remember in the 90s, I was in a locker room and we had metal spikes, and I remember some guy like twisting his spikes on the towel. We didn't invent it, but we're able to kind of measure it and actually see what it does do for golfers. Maybe the shoes they're wearing kind of stink. We do more stuff in here for shoes to make that efficient, because maybe we can't feel that because we're missing friction points within our shoes, or the shoes kind of so flexy that we can't do that. Everybody should be playing with a big spike on their shoes, but we can't do that nowadays, right? So how are we able to feel that? Working with guys like Josh Koch and the champ Jason Zubek and all these guys that are, the most efficient loaders on the planet that can swing it that fast. they're really digging in. They're really feeling these dynamic things. And if you're a 20 handicap, this helps set the table. And the great part is this is something you can feel. We have 2 connection points in Travis, right? We can feel the handle and we can feel our feet. That's all we can feel.
Yeah.
I used to get lessons and the guy's like, can you feel your trail hip there? No, I can't feel that. I can't feel that. I can't even feel if the face is open 2 or 3 degrees.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so what are we teaching? Well, let's teach some things that every skill level can kind of feel. And I think that there's huge value in that. And this is one line of action, lateral force, right to left force, that can influence how we load in the golf swing.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I want to get in deeper here to loading and what that means. But before we get to that, quick word. If you're like most golfers, you blame yourself when you miss a short putt. So after you hold back the urge to throw your putter in the lake, don't do that. You try to fix your putting stroke. But how long does that last? 1 week, 1 round, 1 hole? There's a company called Lab Golf that doesn't think you should be blaming yourself. That's because all putters have this thing called torque, which means the putter face is trying to twist during stroke, so you grip it like a snake. What Lab Golf did is they figured out how to make putters with no torque. They call it lie angle balance, and you have to feel it to believe it. I did. The Lab Golf putter, you don't have to use a funny putting grip to try to keep the face square. You can putt it any way you want because Lab Golf putter stays perfectly square by itself. It's effortless. To see how much easier putting can be, head over to labgolf.com. So Lab Golf last week on the LPGA Tour first, Challenge Tour first, PGA Tour second, LIV second, DP World Tour third. How are they doing, folks? Lab Golf. We've got them, every one of them here in the studio, fitting. If you haven't tried one, you should. And you're probably seeing right there for those watching, you see a fitting going on at the backdrop here with True Spec. Guy just got fitted for a new driver. So good stuff. Golf is, real quick, John, golf is just absolutely booming in Florida. Yeah. I can't even explain it to you. I mean, I tried to take my son last minute to go play around a golf for the Super Bowl on Sunday, and we got a tee time on a course at 1:30. That's as soon as we could have got out on any public course in the greater Jacksonville area. Just packed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same here in Virginia. I mean, we're in a very populated DC metro area. Good luck finding a tee time. It's been which is great, right? It's been amazing for us. And I think instruction, especially, there's more people getting into it. There's more people that want to know more about the game. I think if you're an instructor in this time, it is a great time to be a golf instructor. Because there is so much interest, and golf is, I mean, it's everywhere now. It's more mainstream. It's for everybody, which is great.
There's no doubt about it. Well said. All right. So I love this next video. All right. The video you sent me. I watch all your videos by I have the ones you put on there, but I haven't, these ones that you sent me, I hadn't seen on the, on your stuff. So this is good stuff. All right. So audience, this one is about the loading sequence and something called free moment, which I want you to describe it now, what the free moment means before they watch this.
Yeah, free moment you could think of as if you remember that game Jacks, where you'd throw the ball up and you'd have to grab the jacks, right? If you take a jack and you could spin that jack, right? What did the jack do? It would just kind of spin like a top, right? Now, once you created that action, you didn't have to apply any other force. It would just go, right? So it's a buildup of that. And so in our golf swings, we're kind of trying to do that with our feet. So it goes up the system. There is some momentum of that load that kind of goes into the trail hip and goes into the trail side. So if we don't have any of that buildup, and with that free moment in golf, it's the trail foot, and it's how the trail foot is kind of digging and pushing and creating this top-like rotation. How fast you can create it, how much of it you create it helps go up the chain to load the system. The feet play a huge role in how you're going to load. My example again, pulling the rubber band back and letting it go. How are you setting that up? And that all starts very, very early within the golf swing. So this video is more on kind of a free moment and how that's building up and how we're using it. And we do use, you can use about 20% of that within torques. So it just helps our body load.
All right, here we go. This is great video.
So looking at the loading sequence, the free moment, and on gas, what we're actually looking at is we're looking at this free moment measured in body weight under the trail foot as we load. So if you think about, if you look down at your foot in your golf swing, it's going to be creating some friction. It's actually going to be moving in a rotational clockwise type manner as you create your backswing. And this is a prime kind of principle of how we would actually load the trail hip more efficiently. So if we see the first golf swing here on the left, and we're looking at player setup and player going in motion, and we look at that free moment underneath that right foot, you can see there really isn't a big increase in that body weight that is underneath them. So now it could be more how they get off the golf ball, more static, more golf club first, more arms moving back. So setting the tone as far as how we want to load dynamically around that trail hip has a lot to do with the free moment. So actually what we gave this player is just a little bit more momentum. So we're going to put a little bit more pressure into that left foot, send that pressure and momentum to the trail side and break against that. So you're going to see an earlier vertical pop up, much bigger vertical component here. And you're going to see this positive increase in body weight that is going on underneath that trail hip that helps load that trail hip a little bit better. So this is something that we use in gaps to kind of measure a loading sequence and whether it's efficient or not efficient.
I said this last week with Jim McLean, who was on, and he uses some force plates as well, I think, at his academies more so now. And he talked about with a lot of good players, they're seeing different patterns. And I mentioned something to him. I said, it's always interesting when you start talking about this loading in this video and how the body works and you're getting that, beginning of that effect, right? That jack effect up the chain, up the system, that it is up. It does feel like when players do this, it feels like they are almost kind of elongating a little bit up versus staying down.
Yeah, I think, if you look at every tour player that I've looked at, or let's just take a really good ball striker. I got a little example here. If they have a center of mass of their body, which is kind of around the navel area, right? That center mass is always going to work up. It works a little bit. This might be opposite on camera, but it's always going to work a little bit up. Maybe there's a little lateral motion. Some guys have more, obviously, but it works a little bit up and a little bit down because that's the way we're kind of swinging that golf club. If you keep that body down and the mass down and just swing it, it's going to get shorter. It's going to get flatter. It's going to get underneath you. You better be big and strong, like a John Rahm, to be able to put some torque in that. So, the influence of what we initially do off the ball. And if you watch me teach, Travis, and I've seen you teach, you're a great instructor. It's just like what we're doing off the ball for that person a lot of times makes a huge difference, right? And by having the force plates, it's just showing us exactly what is happening and the rate of that force and the magnitude of that force and the direction of that force. That feed me all of that information because that's great for me to interpret that. So that loading system is key. And maybe somebody is not doing it as fast as like a tour player might do it. Maybe somebody does it, where everything is more equal. Like if I look at a Robert Rock, right? I mean, I could watch that guy swing all day, right? Yeah. It just looks, so he's probably not blowing through all these momentum pieces so fast, but man, there's stuff happening there that he can load that system in a way that it happens. And I think, for me, if I stay in that realm of how that body is really loading, it really affects what we see with the golf club. If somebody's throwing the golf club outside or somebody's throwing the golf club way inside, you could just look at where they're going in their feet. If it's way outside, they're probably lowering their mass a ton, have no push. If it's going inside, they probably have no towel drill. They're just spinning open, right? So you could start to those would be what we call matchups, I guess, within the world of teaching. But I'm still a big believer that I've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of captures. I don't know what a matchup really is. I mean, I'll be honest, Travis, like I don't know if there's like, hey, if you get to 20% at this time
Right.
of your right to left force, you're gonna be amazing. I don't see that. You know, you could look at it, you could look at impulses, you can look at a lot of things, but I do think you know, how you pressure the ground and how you pressure the grip, there are good things that happen in there that we can look at. I think the grip also something we talk about, where I don't think being strong and neutral and weak, I don't think all that is important. It's the overall pressure that we put on the thing. You know, I used to teach a kid, and he'd come in, he'd have his hand so far over, and I go, this guy's gonna hit a 50-yard slice, and he hits a 2-yard draw, and he went on to play at Belmont University. He's an amazing player. So it's not the positioning so much, it's how we pressure that. And that's the same thing within the feet. It's how we pressure that body that we're presenting to hit the golf ball.
And so for that example, a little movement to the front side and then over to the trail side, and you can see how the forces were changing there and the magnitude of it. And then, so a player now, as they do that, and he's turning, okay, and he's got the towel effect going. Does that now encourage kind of the right side of the pelvis to climb a little bit, and where do they start feeling that in their feet? If you had to say to someone, all right, you've got that little momentum going the right way, we're pressuring the towel and we're turning, and what could they sense in their feet perhaps, or glute or whatever that might kind of lead them down the path of, yeah, this is pretty good, this is what I should be feeling?
Yeah, I think it's a little different for everybody, but I think, you know, once you create that momentum to push, right? So let's say that initial, you saw that we gave that student some momentum, meaning they took that left foot and they just kind of pushed into the trail fight. Now there has to be a response from that trail foot, right? So if you push enough into it, if I'm in my chair and I just push and I don't respond, I'm gonna hit the wall.
Yeah, you're pushing that towel now, right? Yeah.
Right. So I'm pushing. My trail foot is going to say, okay, I feel this now. What am I going to do with this force? Where am I going to send it? Well, what's great is it tries to send it right back to where it came from. So when that's happening, that's that free moment. And usually there's a bigger push in that, so that vertical starts to increase. I think what players feel overall, from kind of what I talk to them, whether your trail leg extends because of that, whether your trail leg stays flexed and you feel it more in your torso, everybody's a little bit different with how they feel that dynamic. But I tell you what they feel, and what they always tell me is, I feel like I can feel like muscle activation in my right thigh, my glute, those areas, they can feel loading very quick compared to when they didn't. And I think, you know, that's what we want. We want them to have some sort of feel within how they're moving along the ground. So I think, you know, if you do it as fast as you possibly can, you're probably going to elevate more, right? It's going to throw your body up around. And that isn't bad if you're still braking enough, right? And you're still controlling some of that mass moving a little bit. I think that's a good element. So, you know, if you look at somebody who's more static, meaning you don't see a lot, you know, you look at Minwoo Lee or some of these guys that look like, man, that pelvis just stays right where it is, and they swing the club, but they are ripping. They're ripping that towel. So everybody's response to the force is different than what we see, right? Scotty Scheffler's feet go crazy at the end. Well, that's a different response in his system, maybe because that some of that torque is so late that he blows through it. So everybody's going to have a different look, but usually we get the same feedback. Like, man, I could feel that in my leg, or I can even feel like I'm sending that momentum up. You know, it's a matter of sending that momentum into that trail foot that I think is kind of new. Some guys maybe do it too much, and they might overrun that. Well, that's when we just towel rip a little bit more left hand, right, to stabilize it, right?
Yep.
You just keep nudging. You just keep nudging those forces for players, which is this is what we do.
I want to move the conversation to the downswing now a little bit, and we're going to get into what's called the moment arm here in a second, and just giving you that a little heads up for the audience, because you're going to want to buckle up for that one on the concept of that. But let's just do some kind of quick hitters. I want to throw a couple things at you. and then you can react to them however you want. It could be like, yep, yes or no, or elaborate on it.
Yeah.
And the first one, as we've loaded the system now up in the backswing, we're creating some action, the right action. We're kind of, working up a little bit, spiraling up, and now we're ready to change direction. 25 years ago, it was, bump, right? Kind of bump your left hip. Spine would take on early side bend. You hear today's game, a lot of fall left, right? Kind of fall left. What does that mean to you? Fall left. Do you like that on the downswing?
I like that for the right person, or I do like that if you are trying to go as fast as you can.
Okay.
To break those two things down.
Yeah.
When we see the bump, right? When you see someone go to the top and they're about to transition and they bump that pelvis out in front of the torso, the only way to push that pelvis out is if you're kind of pushing with something. Something has to push in order for that pelvis to go out. And that's usually the right foot still pushing to kind of push the pelvis out. And the issue with that is, well, if your right foot is still, or the trail foot is still pushing, the pressure is still in your trail foot. So you're going to hit, this was me. I'm going to lay this out over half the shots at times because I can't get my pressure out of my trail side. There are guys that kind of have some of that look that control their mass with it. If the mass is so far back and they're bumping forward, good luck getting that pressure to land left.
Right.
I think that was a big issue when I started teaching a lot of people that had, hey, in transition, I'm going to slide my pelvis out in front to kind of create this stretch. Like, that's what I've been told. Like, let's create that stretch, right? Well, the problem with that is now your upper mass and your lower half are separating and all the pressure is still in that trail side. And that's an issue. That's where that's where your low point becomes God knows what with that. The landing left is a term that I think, the first time I ever heard that was like Dana Dahlquist, 9 years ago. And Dana's 2D vision is, God, it's amazing what that guy can see, right? Yep. Dana's eye is so good. And he had these guys like loading up and landing. And I'm like, what is that? That's awesome, right? And I think that is just more the vertical exchange underneath the feet where you don't leave that pressure to the trail side. It jumps to the lead side. The only way for us to change pressure from our trail foot to our lead foot is under the vertical scale. If I push laterally or right to left, I'm still on that foot. So I'm not changing that vertical scale. I might be changing the moment arm, which we could talk about, but I'm not getting my pressure to get to go from trail to lead. So I think it depends. I think I'm a little bit more in favor as at the top of your swing, you better not be 50-50. You better already be kind of at least be seeking that overall pressure is to the lead side. 50-50 is dangerous because if you're 50-50 with 0.25 seconds in your downswing, I don't know if you're going to be there on time. We want to get there earlier. That's why I think all these things spike and create that sequence. If we do it earlier, everything happens a little bit earlier. So yeah, I think those are both terms. They're both efficient. I do have one guy that bumps his hip out, but his mass kind of follows it. So he gets on top of it. That's okay. But I think when we create too much separation with the pressure still on the trail foot, that's where there's an issue. There are guys, you got like Victor Hovland that can have his mass way over here and he can still pressure left. I think that, that's amazing for me to see. But I think if we start to get too far away from those dynamics of what our body can do, I think it just makes it more difficult.
Yeah, and Dana's great. And Dana will actually be here in Studio Players Week. And he's doing our last in studio series. And we'll go deeper with Dana on some of these concepts too. But and I know he, like when he's kind of fallen left, as you're talking about, oftentimes you'll even see that left heel kind of kick in and like it'll kind of catch it. There's like a stopping point of the hip and the knee kind of more on top versus sliding too lateral outside. And it's almost you know, I think in some ways, and tell me if you agree with this, it's kind of like where some of the squat action started to kind of come to life, right? Where it's like, okay, I've kind of working up and now I'm going to kind of squat or sit, where these knees kind of, they take on more of this kind of feels like the splitting action versus this lateral sliding action with the knees, you know, and now I'm kind of squatting and feeling the knees split a little bit. I almost, you know, you almost feel like your right glute is, you know, kind of sitting a little more over towards your right heel, you know, and all of a sudden this language starts to take off, right? And and like that's totally different than the conversation of the bump and too much of that stretch. And that's but again, like you said earlier, it depends on the player probably to some degree, but that little blend of lateral into rotation still applies, right? I mean, we're trying to blend that the right way at the right time.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you look at the three forces that we're working on, whether it's lateral, whether it's toe heel force, or what people might call AP force, anterior, posterior, that's you just moving towards your toes, towards your heels, and verticals, ups and downs. I've never seen a golf swing that doesn't have all three, right? I've never seen one that's like zero. So everybody is going to go through those planes of motion. We differ directionally, and we differ in magnitude of that. And yeah, I think the downswing is one thing that is, you know, it's a hard thing because we look at it and we say, okay, now from the top, let's have you do this, right? And we're asking a student to make all those kind of like feels in such a short split second of time, right? And that's why I feel like, you know, when I go to the top and I transition, I don't feel a whole lot, but I do feel like my pressure has changed, right? I do feel like I can't transition out of the top if my pressure is still to the trail side. I'm going to go to the top, and you know, going back to Dana's point, if I'm going to the top and I'm going to kind of land in that left, well, that's that vertical that's going up and down. That's why you see people squat or you see people get deeper, and that even goes up the chain to like, you know, like floaty hands and like lag concepts. There's a lot of those things that you start looking at that go, oh, well, that's the reason why that guy does it, or maybe why that person can't have that feel. So I think when you're looking at ground reaction forces, I want to set it up the best way I possibly can. So when they get to that top, they are just more efficient and faster with motion. We're creating torque, right? If we talk about like we're trying to create torque, and you know, in gas, what I'm able to see if they create frontal plane torque, which is just torque that goes around your body this way, like a Ferris wheel, and I'm able to see horizontal plane torque, like if you stood in the middle of a hula hoop and the hula hoop was spinning around you. Those are the two cogs that we get to see. And if one of those is higher than the other, the efficiency is not good. We want both of those engines, those torque packages. It's like putting a book bag on you with you know, jet rocket engines on the back of this book bag, and you're like, all right, man, I'm about to launch. Well, if one of those is faster or more powerful than the other one, you're going to go all over like a deflated balloon. But if I put that jet pack on and both of those torque engines are priming together, and I'm just going to rise and I'm just going to kind of go, right? So we want to set them up. That's the one thing I do look at with this system is like, what are the torques? Is this frontal plane torque really high? Well, they're probably really fast, but they probably hook every ball on the planet. Or is this horizontal one where they're just sitting and spinning and rotating? You know, or is that real high? Well, they're probably going to miss a lot of shots, low point control, and not be as fast, right? So it enables us to really, I think, find the answer earlier and sets them up for that transition sequence a little bit better.
All right, good stuff. Let's finish up here with one more video. This video is about the moment arm. Watch this, listen to this, and then we'll come back and Jon will, you know, really peel this back and what moment arm means in the golf
So
swing.
a moment arm, when we're talking about a moment arm and describing that moment arm, when we're looking at force plates, we're looking at that total red force vector and how it's getting in back of the center of mass, either by tilting or moving the whole directional line of center of pressure. So it's how it gets behind the center of mass and how it jumps out in front. On gas, it's actually measured in inches. So as the player goes back in the backswing, we actually create a little bit of moment arm in the backswing. So right here on the numeric value on gas, the peak moment arm is measured at about 1 inch. And then as player gets in transition, there's right to left force, the arrows start tilting, and that arrow actually gets more over it, on the left side of the plate. It just gets more out in front of that center of mass. So the peak moment arm here, valued around the top, is about 13 inches or so on this player. So I think when we're talking about moment arms, it's used to create torque, and that's important because, again, that gets the angular momentum of the system kind of going in a golf swing. A moment arm is really what transfers a force to a torque or a torque to a force. So when we're talking about speed, we really need to increase that moment arm. We've talked before about torque, and it's the force times the moment arm. It's easier to kind of get a bigger moment arm to get more torque in the system for golfers.
All right, so take us through that on the beginning there of what that moment arm is and the importance.
Yeah, when we're talking about the moment arms, especially in the beginning of the golf swing, and we know that creating a moment arm is a buildup of torque, which is a good thing. We want to kind of create that early. So I think if I have a center of mass, which is the red dot, Travis, and we have pressure, and I got this marker right underneath this pressure. This is like the overall pressure in your feet. And if I put these two together, this thing will not spin, right? It just won't spin. If I want this thing to move and I apply force, I need to get it either behind the center mass or I need to get it in front of the center mass. And that's what makes the wheels spin. And the same thing horizontally, going in front and going behind. So if you want to look at early extenders, this is something that you could look at for early extension. Like maybe that thing is going in a position that's making them stand up or vice versa. So a moment arm, creating pressure and getting pressure to get behind the mass in the backswing, and then the pressure needs to jump and get in front of the mass in transition, right? So that's what builds up the speed of that engine, that mass, and it makes your body kind of create those torque systems. The biggest thing that I see is that most people don't create a big enough moment arm off the ball to kind of make it work. We want, now in my system, it would be a negative torque off the ball, but that negative flows really great into a positive torque. So when someone comes in, they go, John, I don't feel like I swing it very fast anymore. I'm losing distance. I hit every club the same length or whatever it is. I'll look at that moment arm because maybe that pressure where it is relative to the mass isn't really moving too much on either side of the mass. So there isn't anything that's going to be torquing the system in the golf swing. So most people off the ball, if you just click the golf club and you stand comfy and cozy and swing the golf club back, we're not going to create any moment arm off the ball, right? So because our feet and our pressure haven't moved before our mass has moved, right? So that's why I think weight shift is like really hard. Like, I don't know if we're really changing weights, but we're really moving pressure around, boom, 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 pretty quickly, because if we can get it moving behind our masses, that's what starts to kind of spin our wheels, right?
Yeah.
So I think that moment arm discussion is important. I hear it talked about a lot in transition, like boom, all right, boom, you got to get that pressure out in front of the mass. I think for most golfers, I think they need to set that up in the backswing as well, because it helps the overall, like pulling that rubber band back and loading it. It helps all of that load system in the golf swing. So it's that torque base. If we know that torque is force times that moment arm, you could easily just tell your student, Travis, like, hey man, I need you to swing. I need you to do exactly what you're doing and just swing it harder and harder and harder. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they want, right? I don't know if they're
Yeah,
going to come
right.
back to you too many times. But if you can say, all right, well, we can change the torque element by actually just creating a bigger moment arm. And if we
Mhm.
do that, we should see speed gains really, really go up. So, teaching that is a little tricky. I know your audience might be like, what in the heck is that? What do I even, how do I even see a moment arm?
Mhm.
I think you got to get on some plates that kind of show that, and they're able to kind of see where your pressure is relative to where the mass is, to keep that as simple as I can. If you're one that kind of throws your mass around in the golf swing, you and I both know those probably aren't the fastest, most dynamic swings that we
Right.
see, right?
Right.
Unless unless their body is so impinged that's how they have to play golf, then that's okay. But when we see, that's the one thing we can't see in 2D is we can kind of see like, oh man, this guy is moving his mass all over. So we know that the moment arms being created in that golf swing
Yeah.
are probably not efficient for that golfer.
Yeah. It's almost like the old Jimmy Ballard swing, right? Kind of the
Yeah.
it was like head cover, which has value, and I'm not knocking it, but it's like when you kind of go dual head covers and you kind of turn right and turn left, you can get that upper mass kind of drifting to the right, drifting to the left, and when you see that with the upper body, to John's point, like you're not creating that moment arm big enough where you're losing some power, you're losing some speed. Now the towel drill, I would imagine, is very good for this, right? And kind of blending. Let me ask you this real quick: blending the loading seat, the video we talked about the loading, right? Kind of creating that momentum with some of the towel drill. Do you like that
there you go.
underneath?
Okay. Now you're making some magic there, right?
Yeah.
Because I think I do the towel drill to introduce the feel, right? And I go, do you feel that? Do you feel that you can actually preset that before? That's something you have control over. But to sprinkle in kind of that loading system, it's just I want them to understand how to feel and hit the brakes and create that lateral force based off of what they're feeling with that momentum, right? And I think that's where you're starting to make magic, where you go, okay, I want you to feel that tension line. We got to push more with the lead side anyways to get off the ball because we got to move the club behind us. So the lead foot is always going to win a little bit, but it's when does that right foot take over again that's going to start to build the chain of motion, right? Do you go all the way up to the top and that right foot is not dug in yet at all? That's a problem. There are some guys that go 3 inches off the ball and their trail foot is winning already. Some go to P2 and everybody's a little bit different with that. But yes, when you're sprinkling in a little bit of that motion, that movement, and that momentum and then braking, that's really kind of what sets that chain. And you're right. I think if you feel that, you're not going to move your mass around as much to get off the golf ball. So your pressure is going to already be over there. So you can start to create some of that moment arm that's needed to load efficiently. Yeah, that's
good stuff. I love that loading sequence with some of the towel, and that gets like you said, the magic. I think you said underneath the feet there, and then how that kind of works up the spine. And if you can get someone to do that, what we just described, with a reasonable swing shape and face angle and wrist, just reasonable. I mean, they are so far down the path of now change of direction, working. Now it's kind of starting to work for you. Now, are there more things that can be done? Of course, but I love what you're saying, John. And I've always kind of got the sense in watching your videos that working the system and in the backswing, and I love what you said, creating that moment arm in the backswing, and then letting that now come down and benefit from that, right? And benefit from that on the downswing. You've incentivized your downswing to be much better.
Yeah. I think you're setting the plate. If we know most of the golf swing is the backswing, well, what are we really doing to help that, right? Like, what are we really doing? And I think everybody's response to these forces is just different. And that's why you might see, like, somebody a little bit more laid off, or
Yeah.
those are things as an instructor. I think you can go in there and maybe put some of those pieces together for them as far as what the golf club does. But I tell you, very rarely does somebody get off the golf ball very efficient with this load system and what we've been talking about, and the club goes all over the place because it
Yeah.
it almost can't, Travis. You know what I mean? Like the club goes all over the place because we are not preparing the body to move, and we don't have an understanding of what I need to do in my body, in my system, to kind of have some control there. End of the day, I got to get that player to hit it better on the face. Like that is my only.
Yeah.
That's my only job. My job is not to improve their ground reaction force, right? My only job, and I think you can almost get to a point where ground reaction forces are, man, that looks good. Let's change your shoes and try something different. Something like that. But end of the day, I gotta get that golf club on that golf ball. I gotta give that guy what he wants. I just do it in a way under the hood that I can kind of see the body and how it's responding and the reason why they're actually swinging. So if you think about it, lateral force is going to affect side bends in the spine. AP force, toe heel force, is going to affect the pelvis line, sagittal plane, how a player might be moving the pelvis line. Vertical force is just the up and down. So if you look at a golf swing without even looking at it, and you've got some of that knowledge, you can easily kind of put these pieces together and say, man, I bet this is low if I were to look at it. And yeah, it's low, but I can't take away everybody's kind of superpower of what it is that how they like to move, because then they can't play. And you can't put the club face to the golf ball.
All right. Last question.
Yeah.
Does the ground push back? That's like everybody's like, some guys are like, yeah, it pushes back, and no, the ground can't push, right? There's a guy today on Twitter. I'm not going to mention his name, but I'll just read you this tweet and then I'll let you react to it. Okay. And it's a good bow to our discussion today, which has been awesome. So he says there seem to be a bunch of golf pros out there objecting to the concept of the ground pushing back. One way to come to terms with this idea is to imagine doing a bench press, and right in the middle of the rep, the bench collapses. The bench was definitely pushing back and providing a base of support until it broke and you died.
Yeah, good question. Absolutely, the ground pushes back 100%. If you bounce a basketball, Travis, right? Mm-hmm. You just bounce a basketball on a court, and you flip-flop that. You had like superpower human strength. You could pick the basketball, you could piss the whole court up, and you could bounce the basketball that way too, right? Yes, if you are pushing into the ground is pushing you back. There is no, there's no way around the scientific. And I am not a biomechanist, I tell you that much. Like if I had Steve Gould or Dr. Standiford or some of these guys I talk to all the time standing behind me and me talking, it's like I'm just a golf instructor with some technology a niche that I found, right? But yeah, you can't ignore, and I don't know. I mean, sometimes there's people make noise to make noise, right? To be different, to make conversation. I mean, we can't ignore the laws, that have been discovered, and we can't just dismiss those because we can't feel it or we can't find a way to measure it. But we can. But we can. Everybody's using the ground until their feet are off the ground and they're trying to they're making a golf swing. What's interesting, we do that test, right? Like where we put people in like a bar stool chair and we have them hit a golf ball, right? So no feet on the ground. And you can see the body displacing and going in the opposite direction. And they're usually 50% less than their normal speed. So if you swing at 100, you're going to swing that thing about 50 miles an hour. And it's usually right around that 50%. So until someone shows me scientific proof otherwise, the ground is not pushing back. I don't know how they do that, but yeah, I mean, it's always there.
Well, I think the thing you got to agree to is that we're using the ground. We all know the
Yeah.
ground is important, and so how is one using the ground, and how can one improve upon that? And I think that was really kind of the goal of this pod. And there's more to this discussion, I know, but I think this was awesome in some of the concepts that that define ground reaction forces and how they have now become part of the golf lexicon and instruction world, which for me, like I've, I know enough about it and I've used a little bit of it and probably enough to be dangerous. I'm not a biomechanist. It's an area for me, transparency. Like I've kind of dedicated a little bit more in 2025 to get a little deeper for my own knowledge of helping players. So, so I really, thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And I think we should do it again. I think down the road, I think this is something I want to keep going. Like I mentioned, Dana Dahlquist will be in studio March 9th for the players. We've got a full house in here. We'll video that and send it out. And part of that discussion is going to be force plate. Nice. But I love it.
I'll come hang out in the corner. I'll come hang out.
Hey, are you in town? You in town for the players maybe?
Yeah, I might be. I'll come hang out in the back room and
hey, no, seriously, let me know. Yeah, let me know. We'll get together. That would be awesome. But hey,
that sounds great, Travis.
Jon Eisman, go follow him, people. I'm telling you, at Eisman Golf Academy. His website, eismangolfacademy.com. Thanks, Jon.
Thank you for having me on, Travis. Appreciate it.